Hey folks, thanks for watching this presentation. I really appreciate you taking the time. So I'm Rhoda, and I'm the customer support warrior and a triage lead at Olark. And today I'm going to take a gallop through how we built and are still building a triage team at Olark. You might use tier 2 or second level support instead of triage, but the idea is the same. It is the next rung up from frontline customer support, where the more gnarly issues end up. Olark has a set of core values which I personally think are awesome, and I'm putting them here briefly because a lot of the decisions I make and our team makes are based on these values, and I will be referring to them in the next wee while. We have chill out, help each other, make it happen, assume good faith, practice empathy, speak your mind. We call them CHAMPs for short. Now, I live 40 miles off the west coast of Scotland, on the Isle of Tiree, an island with 600 inhabitants. Olark is a distributed company based in San Francisco, and when it comes to remote, I like to think that I have it nailed. I'm a vegetable farmer with an animal menagerie and active as a local community counsellor. Working remotely is my perfect scenario. I've been a techie since I first saw my dad upgrade from a typewriter to an Amstrad. I may not look it, but I am that old. Ever since, whether it was working at the BBC or in community development, computers and communication have been my thing. A few months ago, after 2 years with Olark, I levelled up from frontline customer support and took on the role of triage lead, forming a new triage team with 2 recent hires. Triage had previously been handled by the awesome Joe Westhead, who single-handedly dealt with customers, advised frontline, liaised with engineers, and kept an impressive number of edge cases in his head, along with an encyclopedic knowledge of all of our feature request JIRAs. When he levelled up to the product team, it took 3 of us to fill his shoes. In doing so, we wanted to ensure that we developed a system which would also work for new team members and allow us to expand the work of triage, not just as a firefighting team, but as a team which interfaced intentionally between frontline CS and customer need and the product teams who are pushing the product forward. Although I have a reasonable front-end understanding, I am admittedly limited when it comes to back-end issues, and I confess to finding logs a continual challenge. I can, however, organise and develop processes, keep an overview, and remember random facts and edge cases. Dennis in New York has a good working knowledge of front and back-end programming, and his log reading is black belt. Alicia's in Vancouver. Her documentation skills are kick-ass, and she has a back-end programming covered. We make a pretty good team. To make a triage team which worked for Olark, with each member in a different time zone, we needed to find a process that worked for all 3 of us. We started by figuring out our responsibilities. Somewhere along the line, someone came up with the idea of us as turtles. It stuck. The triage turtles were born. We honed our role into a set of activities, and Dennis honed the title to spell the words turtles. We triage, sort, sift, and select. Unbreak, that's fixing, assigning, or monitoring. We deal with requests, managing feature requests, daylighting those requests, and managing expectations. We deal with training, support documentation, triage documents, and feedback on tickets. We make tools, improving the tools that we have available to Olarkers. We also manage downtime. We call that emergency. And share. We encourage 360-degree feedback between customers, product teams, and other stakeholders. We're still honing these and getting ramped up, but they make an excellent framework to base decisions around. To make all of that work, we discovered we needed 3 key things: honesty, communication without noise, and flexibility. Now, at this point, I must tell you that this is by no means a finished process. We are still working on it, still discovering new things, and still ironing out wrinkles. I really hope we keep doing that. I don't believe that any process, in terms of how things should be done, is ever the finished article. There is always something new to learn. I'm starting with honesty. It's been the trickiest and the most crucial element for me in the last few months. As a company, Olark strives to help people communicate with their customers using our chat box. We encourage real people to chat, not bots, not automated responses, but real people who make typos and sometimes need to admit they don't know the answer. We know that being honest with a customer is important. We try to live that out in our communication, be that in frontline or in triage. When I took on triage lead, I noticed a few things that concerned me, things I had been doing. I'd been sending cases to triage with the immortal words, "I'll escalate this to our engineers, and they'll get it sorted." I'd been saying, "We don't currently have that feature, but I've added you to the list for that request, and we'll be in touch." Now, I was in charge of making sure cases were sorted, and I was the owner of a Jira collection which, were its shoes, would make Imelda Marcus very proud indeed. It dawned on me that by trying to make customers happy, I had been lying to them. Not deliberately, but through a desire to make sure that they left every interaction with us feeling like they had been heard. But wait, it's not fair on customers to let them think that an issue which stems from a network problem on their end will be fixed by Olark. It creates an expectation we cannot meet. It's not fair to implicitly suggest to a frontline CS that every time they make a Jira, they're going to see a feature happen. It creates an expectation that neither our product plan, our triage team, nor our engineering resources can meet. And creating an expectation, however well intended, without a definite fix in mind or without a timeline, is something which can cause resentment, both for customers and for colleagues. Someone might say, "I thought that was getting done," or "I wrote that Jira months ago, why has nothing happened?" Or indeed, "The person I chatted to said you would fix it." The first thing I needed to do was to be honest with myself. I want to fix things, and I want them fixed now. Patience is not a virtue I have. I needed to accept that not everything will get fixed, and that not every request can be met. So we introduced some triage rules. Triage rule number 1, not everything can be fixed. Triage rule number 2, not everything can be fixed. Sorry, triage tool number 2, not everything will be fixed. And both of these things are okay. It's hard to tell a customer that we have no intention of building the feature they want. But by stringing them along for 6 months, not only is it even harder, but we have lost their trust. Honesty, as my mother likes to remind me, is the best policy. And no one ever said it would be easy. Here's an example. In this case, the situation is far from ideal. We have a feature we are trying to deprecate, but for some people it still works. It's not deprecated on old accounts, but it is on new accounts. Now, there's a whole different talk here about deprecating features, graceful degradation, and outright code killing. However, when this arrives in triage, those points are moot. We need to find a way to explain to the customer this issue is not one which will be fixed, whilst trying to give them the best experience possible. So this was the tack I took. I admitted that there was an issue, that the issue was a tricky one. I explained the current situation, that we'd stopped supporting the Popout feature precisely because of these problems, and that we'd no longer allow new accounts to pop the chat box out. I suggested a solution, which was to disable the Popout function, and I apologised that I wasn't able to help more. In this case, the response was well received. Not all answers will be, and that's okay too. In the long run, an upset customer might realise that whilst Olark couldn't provide the answer they wanted, we were at least honest and upfront, and that counts for a lot. To make the triage process work, we needed to evaluate what worked and what didn't. We encouraged a change in how we handed off from frontline to triage. For example, I changed my language. Instead of saying, "We'll get that sorted," I said, "We'll look into that." Instead of saying, "I'll add you to the feature request list," I said, "Thanks for the feedback. I can't make any promises, but I'll make sure and pass that on." I was inspired by an awesome blog post Joe Westhead wrote about how we escalate tickets, called "Let Me Escalate This" to an engineer. And the link will appear shortly. We'll put the link in the comments below. I'm planning a show and tell on a similar topic soon. Now, we have those weekly, and it's a great way to learn from colleagues. So moving on to Jira's, we got a bit radical. We actually banned all other colleagues from making feature requests. So when I say Jira in this instance, I mean a feature request. We now triage those feature requests as well as incoming technical support requests. It gives us a filter, it avoids duplicates, and it allows for a certain level of curation. We set about culling old feature requests in Jira. We are sorting them into product areas, and we will be having honest conversations with project leads along the lines of can fix, won't fix, requires resource allocation. Honesty was the best policy. We have filed a lot of them, and the buckets will hopefully be much more relevant. It will mean some hard conversations about the practicality of ideas people were wedded to, but those are important ones to have. Moving on to processes, Desk.com is a CRM we currently use. Until the new triage team got going, that was how triage tickets were tracked. Notes were left in a case, and the case assigned to engineers where required. It didn't take long to realise that that was not going to work when 3 people across 3 time zones worked on the cases each day. For a start, notes were often lost halfway up a thread. Thanks to Hector, an inspiring engineering lead, we got together with some of the engineering team and radically altered how triage tickets were dealt with. Rather than a CRM, we started using Jira. At Olark, triage tickets are now called SOS tickets. All notes, everything goes in there. The CRM ticket is reserved only for communication with the customer, or for frontline CS to write handover notes. Once the case hits triage, we shift to Jira SOS. All tickets which hit triage are logged in that Jira SOS project. That way we can do accurate reporting on issues. And the third thing we did were postmortems. We hunt down cases which have taken too long to bring to a resolution. We study them, find the weak points, make suggestions, and feed that back into the process. We are honest with ourselves about what went wrong and when we could have done more. I was inspired to kick that process off after reading the sometimes excruciatingly honest postmortems our founders and engineers post on our status page when things go wrong. Ben, one of our founders, makes a point of writing a personal apology after any major outage. He owns the problems, explains why things went wrong, and commits to making things better. Some of the feedback I have seen about our apology emails is truly lovely. Some is not, but honestly, it's the lovely responses which stick with you. The last area where honesty is key is in closing the feedback circle. We can be as honest as we like to customers, but if we're not practicing the same level of honesty with our team, it doesn't work. When it comes to feeding back to each other, I am so fortunate to work with a team where we all feel able to say, sorry, or my bad, I could have done that better. An engineer left a note telling us that a ticket title wasn't clear enough and that he had wasted time reading through to figure out what the issue was. We took that on board, and I know that I personally evaluate my titling more now. My rule of thumb is, would this make sense to my mother? Well, she thinks I actually make chat boxes for a living, like carve them. So maybe that's a step too far, but you know what I mean. A line in our triage process document reads, if a turtle disappeared down a manhole cover tonight, how would Splinter know what he had been up to? Clarity goes a long way. The Olark values make it a safe space to own mistakes, and that in itself is a huge thing. Assume good faith is the best value of any company I have ever worked for, hands down. In terms of feeding back to customers, I am no longer afraid to tell a customer that I don't know. But I tell them I'll follow up with them when I find out. And then crucially, I follow up. As a triage team, we are slowly making peace with the fact that we can't fix everything. Sometimes it is the customer network connection, and there is a limit to what we can do. Sometimes we have to say no, and sometimes customers will churn. What we will do is make sure they know that we are doing our best. We are honest with them, we ask how they are and want a response. And when people are particularly understanding or find a bug or take the time to give us feedback, we send them t-shirts and stickers. Joe once sent an office a box of cupcakes after a particularly gnarly outage. It doesn't take much, but small things go a long way, like remembering a customer took a holiday or recently launched a new site. Feeding back to the team is where I'm going to be honest and tell you that this one area is very much a work in progress. Feeding ideas to product teams will, I hope, be straightforward, advising about relevant feature requests and providing evidence of need. But what I personally find hard is feeding back to people when they need to improve something. Like how they hand over to triage, or when notes aren't sufficient, or when the answer was not so much technical as something they missed. I could definitely work on that. I tend to shy away from saying anything, or couch it so politely that my point could be missed. Maybe that's a Scottish thing. As a triage team, though, we are working on it. We have a doc in progress figuring out ways of improving that particular part of the process. We have recently started updating the whole team on trends to watch out for, so the whole team is aware of triage trends. We've started a triage case of the week in our support sync, where we dissect a case to help the whole CS team learn, and I curate a monthly newsletter from the support team, where we give hints, tips, and gentle reminders. So on to communication. Communication without noise. Everything we tried to do when we were building the team processes came from an understanding that the triage process had to work for all three of us: BST, EST, and PST. The way we took notes and tracked cases had to make sense, whether I am answering a case when Alicia's asleep, or if Dennis is answering a lunchtime query whilst I make my dinner. Some things didn't work. We tried using Trello for ticket tracking, but it was too cumbersome. We tried Google Docs for tracking meetings, but we had to click too many times to find last week's actions. We were honest about what worked, we communicated about what might improve things, and we were flexible enough to give things a try for a few weeks. So now, if it's a project thing, we use Trello. And Trello posts to Slack when we update a card, so we don't need to keep repeating ourselves across different mediums. If it's a broken thing, we send it to Jira. We link Slack conversations in both Trello and Jira where relevant, so we don't have to keep hunting through timelines. When we sync each week, and we make a point of at least one weekly triage sync, we walk through the Jira board of outstanding issues and then use Trello to walk through any cards marked to discuss. Right now, we're using a no-meeting Google Doc to debate the best route for our second phase of Jira auditing. Basically, we argue it out in written form until we have an outline we can start discussing usefully, because you can write your thoughts down on paper on any time of the day or night. What are the hidden benefits then of distributed teams, especially one like our triage team, which is entirely distributed? Well, Olark is not a 24/7 support team. But when Alicia sends an email at the end of day, PST, and the reply comes in during the evening, I can get the next stage of investigation done, or the reply sent, by the time New York is thinking about their first coffee. By leaving each other solid notes, logs, and ideas, we effectively reduce our own workloads by turning tickets around quickly. I work a split shift. Sometimes I don't work during my day, but I work in the evening. It depends what the current set of cases require, where the engineering resources are located, and when meetings are scheduled for. When I come back inside the house to work, I focus and get the job done, so I can go back out and get the next job done, be it herding sheep or weeding carrots. Time shifting is a valuable asset for any customer service organisation. Covering more hours of a day doesn't have to cost you more. It can be as easy as hiring in a different time zone, hiring a full-timer who works a back shift, or embracing split shifts. And we didn't just need to be flexible as a triage team, we needed a flexible organisation to work in. We are incredibly lucky that Olark is a flexible organisation which lives its values, not least the assume good faith value. The whole team needed to be on board with our complete shake-up of the Jira and feature request process. They have been, and I hope they will continue to be. And the engineering team had to be on board with our complete shake-up of ticket tracking. So whether it is time zones, Jira updating, keeping a decent customer response time, or curating feature requests, none of it would work if we didn't work together honestly, if we didn't constantly try to improve our communication, and if we weren't flexible. And when I'm asking myself about these things, I do go through these three options. Could we have done better? How can I say this more efficiently? And is there another way of approaching this? Thanks for sticking with me to the end. I'd love your thoughts, reactions, questions, and suggestions, either as comments or ping me on Twitter or Rhoda at Olark.